Hey guys, it's Kevin. Today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite subjects, and that is calls to action. Now, a call to action is that thing that you're asking someone to do, whether you're selling a product or trying to schedule a service, providing a service, or if you're trying to share an idea, spread your ideas to different people. Your call to action is the thing that you're asking someone to do. But, a lot of calls to action are not that good. In fact, it's a real problem. And so I want to help you create a call to action that will engage with your customers and allow you to convert them from just a person to an actual customer. But, what is a bad call to action, right? What is the thing that we're trying to defeat? What's the problem? So you and I have both seen it. You'll get that newsletter in your inbox and it'll just have a bunch of text in it, and there's not really a lot there of easy to scan. It's just almost overwhelming, right? There's just a mountain of content. And so while that's a problem in itself, the call to action is typically underneath that content, right? So if I got a newsletter and it's to learn about a specific piece of material, maybe a specific subject for me, maybe it's programming, and at the bottom of that newsletter would be the call to action. Maybe it's sign up for a series of videos to learn how to do a specific thing, or buy my book. But the bad, sometimes you'll get that piece of content at the bottom. The call to action is learn more, right? Or read more, or click here. Those aren't real good calls to action. They're too general. And to be honest, they're about the worst you can get. So that even applies to any kind of newsletter content or web content. If you have a newsletter digest and you have 3 different articles and underneath each one you're just saying read more, you really could do better. You would call to a person to the action that that article is specific about, right? So for me, if I'm a programmer and there's an article, maybe it says how to program in PHP, the call to action shouldn't say learn more. It should say something like, become a PHP programmer, click here, right? So that's more engaging and in tune with what I'm trying to do. So how do you create these better calls to action? Well, there's 3 principles that I have to kind of help you set up from a 30,000 foot view. And the first thing you need to do is just slow down, right? When you're creating a lot of content, it can be really easy to fall into the gear of, I just have to get these things done. But getting things done isn't always the priority, right? The priority with a call to action is to convert someone, to get them to click through, to empower them, to bring value to them. So the first step is to slow down. Just ease back and allow yourself some breathing room so you can think clearly about how you're going to position those calls to action. If you're producing a lot of content, it can be real easy, and understandably, a call to action is not easy to create, but it can be easy if we don't slow down, just to kind of rush through and punch in specific words that might not necessarily be so engaging. So the first step is just to slow down and remember what we're actually trying to do, and that's convert people. Once we've slowed down, we can really get our minds into a good frame so we can empathize, and that's the second piece of the equation. We need to be able to empathize and be inside the other person's shoes so we can create really good, engaging content and calls to action. If we aren't empathizing, then we're putting ourselves first. And when you're creating a call to action, it doesn't need to be you focused. It doesn't need to be about what you can take. It needs to be about how you're going to help that person achieve their goals. And so we need to be able to empathize well with people. That's really probably the biggest piece and one of the hardest things that I have to deal with whenever I'm creating a piece of content. And typically I don't empathize because I haven't slowed down. And so that's why you have to slow down first before you try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. So that's really empathy, and we need to have that in our frame of mind before we can move over and connect with people, because again, without empathy, we're not really going to connect with our audience. So once we have that connection through empathy, what do? Well, once we have that connection, the third thing that we need to do is essentially engage with them, right? So we've connected with them, and now it's time to engage and make our pitch. So what does that engaged pitch look like? Now, again, I'm going to harp on this because it's very important and easy to fall out of perspective. We need to empathize when we're doing all of these things. And so to engage, one of the things that you can do, and there's a lot of them, I'm only going to cover a few today, but the first thing that you can do is basically just be clear. Be clear about what you're trying to do. Don't use fluff. Just be straightforward with what you're trying to do. You know your product better than anybody, but most people don't understand all the lingo and the jargon that goes along with the product that you provide. So you really need to be able to simplify what you're talking about. Take whatever it is that you're trying to communicate and distill it down to the simplest form that, the base level customer that you have could understand it in. And that's not an easy process. There's a lot of material out there to help you simplify and clarify your message, but that's really a big deal. If people don't understand what it is you're trying to say, the product that you're trying to offer, you're just going to lose them. So be extremely clear. We've worked with clients in the past where they've come to us and they said, hey, our pages are not performing. They would have, the standard sales copy, 25% off, or, all this kind of stuff that's just distracting. It's almost gimmicky, but what you really need to focus on is being clear. And if you're clear, you're going to succeed in making a good call to action. Now, there's resources out there that you can have. Donald Miller is a really good person to look up. He has Story Brand, and he talks all about this subject. They definitely kind of own that space of clarifying your message through story. And then there's other resources that you have, like books. For example, I have this book by Lee Lefevre, and it's called The Art of Explanation. And in it just kind of walks you through how to explain what it is that you're trying to do. They work with Dropbox and some other companies to really help get them off the ground. And they talk about the art of explaining, the art of being clear about what you're saying. So that's kind of the first piece and probably the biggest one. There's a lot of things that we do in our businesses. We understand it all, but we need to be very clear about what it is that we want people to do. So that's being clear. The second piece to this engagement is just to recognize that time is finite, right? We need to save time. We don't have a lot of time. We don't know how much time we have, and we can't get time from other people. We can't trade time, really. I can't say, hey, I'll give you this, but if you give me 10 years of your life, we're not doing that anytime soon, right? This isn't the movies. So time is super valuable to us. So we need to recognize that when we're creating our content, and the way we do that, recognizing time, is to just be precise and focused with the content that we create. We don't need to go off on tangents and get into too many details. When a person first comes to us inside of our content, whether it's on YouTube, in our newsletter, or on our webpage, we need to look at those things as doorways into our businesses. So those doorways need to be, precise. They don't need to be like a big room with a bunch of stuff in them. They're doorways to get us in. So being precise and focused in that portal piece is what we need. Once you move through that doorway, through the hallways and into the rooms, that's where all the details can be. But the idea is, your opening newsletter, that specific piece to grab someone, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to grab their attention. It just needs to be precise and concise. So we need to understand that time is valuable and respect that. If we don't respect people's time, we're kind of portraying their trust, and then trust is money. So the last piece here, after we have clarity and we've thought about time, it's time to, think about emotion. Now, emotion is the most empathetic part of creating a good call to action. And when we empathize, essentially we have to understand the emotional state of someone. And so, for example, let's say that you have a customer and you are a plumber and they call you. Now, what's their emotional state when they call you? Well, if we put ourselves in their shoes and empathize, we can understand this story a little bit differently. I'm at my house as the customer and my pipes burst and my house starts to flood. It's flooding enough for the kids to pull out the swim gear and start swimming around the house. Now, I'm a little flustered, right? So what do? Well, I'm in a state of panic and fear and almost helplessness. So what am I going to do when I call the plumber? When I go to his website, what is my emotional state? Well, I'm fearful, right? So do I want to escalate that fear with the imagery and the text and play on that? Or do I want to empathize and think about what the person's really after, which is like, I want resolution. I want you to lower my anxiety. I want to know everything's going to be okay. I want to know that I, as a customer, can conquer this flooding of my house, and you, as the plumber, can help me. So when you're creating that landing page and you're thinking about the emotion, you would create an image, perhaps if you have a website, you would have that image as the person confidently standing in their kitchen, everything's been worked out, and the plumber just happens to be there to help them, the customer, be victorious. So here the customer is the hero of our story, right? So we're empathizing and making them number one. So that's part of the emotion. The other part is, does a person in that situation, if I'm thinking about empathy and the emotion of the situation, do they want to talk to a computer or a person? Well, of course, in an emergency situation, you want to talk to a person. You don't want a machine that's in, somebody's got to go look out or be notified. They might not get back to you quickly. So I want a phone number as the call to action. Call now, right? That would be the type of call to action I might want on a web page even, not just a contact form. I don't want a contact form if my house is flooding. I want somebody right now. So that is the emotional piece of a call to action. So if we're being clear, if we're saving time and being precise and concise, and we understand that emotion is involved, that informs us and helps us make really strong calls to action. So go out there, and I want to challenge you to go maybe check out a web page that you have and investigate, how can I make some calls to action really strong? Or if it's a newsletter, try that. It doesn't really matter. The challenge is, go take one piece of material, look at your calls to action, and try to make them stronger.